I'm out.
Well, hello. Welcome, one and all. You guys are tuned in to the Danny K Show at SonicFlare. Thanks for tuning in. And today we have a very, very special guest that generally should need no introduction. A very dear friend of mine that I've known for over 20 years. He's been one of my great mentors in all things records, vinyl, hi-fi, and audio in general. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only, the ears of IMPEX Records, Bob Donnelly.
Hey, everybody.
What's up?
How's it
Good
going?
to see you,
Dan?
Bob.
Good to see you. Again?
Been a while, even though I came to just visit, or I just visited not too long ago. But, now that we're at the opposite ends of the country, it's always good to see you, even if it's on a StreamYard. So yeah, how's everything going? You're busy.
Busy. Obviously, a lot of IMPEX releases have just come out. I'm having to move again soon, so that's never fun.
Yeah.
But I made some improvements in my sound system, so a lot of stuff going on constantly. Busy.
Hey, as the official ears of IMPEX Records and as one of the producers for IMPEX Records, I can only imagine the drum beat you're going to, from production to listening, evaluation, and all that kind of stuff. Before we get into all that, though, introduce yourself a little bit to the audience. Who is Bob Donnelly?
Well, actually, I used to be a photographer back in the day, and I've always been a pretty serious music aficionado. My whole family was as well. Basically just got more and more serious into higher end audio and record collecting, and eventually, after photography running its course with me, started selling records because I got into jazz heavily and realized that this stuff, I get 2 or 3 copies, I don't need them all, and they're very easy to flip. So started selling and then accumulating more and more over the years. It just became a kind of a library for myself of amazing music. And then I met A.B. Fawn through Robert Pincus, who worked for her, and she saw or heard of my vast collection and said, "Hey, do you have this? Do you have that?" Or Robert said you suggested this. Can we borrow a copy? That kind of thing.
Yep.
And the rest is history. I started helping them out with that, and part of my thing throughout all this was I started off in audiophile records, got into jazz, but I always had a preference for great sounding copies, and that got me into I actually met a guy named Tom Port back.
Controversial Tom Port.
And we had a very similar requirement for our sound playback, a lot of energy, a lot of oomph, similar to yourself. And yet still being accurate and what have you. But that led to me helping him find good copies. And I think really the first time it came about was actually with Led Zeppelin 2. I went to his place to purchase the Mobile Fidelity. This is probably back in 1990-ish.
Wow. So we're talking 30 years ago.
Yes. And I brought I had just purchased a copy of the White Label Promo, which, as a collectible, that was awesome. But, I thought, the Mobile Fidelity has got to be the best sounding. So I actually went to his place and, he played me he asked me to bring the White Label Promo with me because he wanted to hear it. We first played the Mobile Fidelity. I was like, oh, that's great. Listen to that bass. Oh boy. I was kind of relatively new to the game.
Yeah.
And then he goes, okay, well, let's hear the Robert Ludwig or the White Label Promo, which happened to be a Robert Ludwig mastered. And we put that on. Both of us like, wow. And I said, Tom, sorry, I don't want your copy.
You're kidding. Sorry. That big of a difference.
So that led to him looking in the dead wax. He was heavily involved in the living stereos and the finding the 1S's because that's what everyone wanted in those days. So
Yep.
he knew to look in the dead wax, in regards to classical, but looking in the dead wax in regards to pop and rock records was relatively obscure thing to do.
Mhm.
And he saw the RL, and he says, "Oh, that's Robert Ludwig." The rest is history. Again, but yeah, over the years, I got heavily into shooting out records for myself,
Yep.
and
I mean, I
that
don't
led.
even want to know how many RL videos you can find on YouTube now that are all searching for the holy grail of that
Right.
RL signature in the dead wax. It's astounding. And here
Yeah.
you are 30 years ago, and it was like, okay, let me ask you this. How many people, audiophiles, back in the day, do you think knew about the RL and the significance of it as opposed to like the crowd today? Was it a big portion? I mean,
No, God, no. It would
no.
have been individuals that took the time to do what we do.
Yeah.
Um, and it was only later that, the audiophile crowd picked up on it. But
Yeah.
no, of course, other individuals, happen upon one and go, "Oh, wow, this sounds way better." Did
Right.
they bother to look in the dead wax to figure out why? Who knows? But
Yeah.
back then, um, frankly, on that record, I remember talking about it on Steve Hoffman forums back in like 2000, 2001, somewhere back then,
Okay.
when someone had started a thread on white label promos. And I said, well, this happens to be one that's one of my favorites. And back then, you know, eBay was still relatively new, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
Nobody was paying any money for Robert Lowe. Nobody even, but I swear to God, Steve Hoffman forums, very popular. After that, I could guarantee you the prices started creeping
Yeah.
up dramatically.
Isn't it amazing? I mean,
Yeah.
you're talking about records that you could pick up for, what, 10, 15, $20?
Oh yeah. All day
And
long.
now, I mean, gosh, what would you sell a white label RL promo for today?
Oh, white label's a different story because that's got the collectability on top of being an RL. I've seen them go as high as 5,000 for mint ones. Yeah.
You
Uh,
kidding?
regular copies, mastered by Robert Ludwig, are averaging in good condition like $1,200, $1,400. I mean, it's crazy.
You're kidding. I guess I
Yeah.
haven't looked in a while.
We
Holy
are talking about really clean ones, which is even harder to come by.
right. Wow, that's insane. That's absolutely insane. Holy
Yep.
cow.
So, back to AB
Yep.
Fawn. Because I had the access to mass quantities of records, and because she liked my ear when she heard things that I suggested, she suggested I come work for her, and then that started first with quality control and suggesting titles. That's kind of was my key thing in the beginning,
Yep.
suggesting titles for reissue, and then supplying great sounding copies for reference when we do master them, and then quality control. Now it's more of a general producer kind of thing.
Yep.
Tackle a lot of things.
Your favorite title that you guys did in recent memory, what would that be? Bob's personal favorite.
Well, it's actually two that have recently come out. The first one was Bud Shank's Barefoot Adventure.
Yep.
Nobody knows this record. I mean, they
Yep.
still don't know it evidently, because, but it's an amazing sounding record. I picked it up out of a collection. I put it on thinking, Bud Shank's great, but it's a surf record, really? No, it's not a surf record at all. It's a straight ahead cool jazz record
Yeah.
with amazing players. I mean,
Yeah.
I won't go through them, but Carmel Jones and Shelly Manne, and I
Yeah.
mean, it's got all the top West Coast guys on it. Or and they're doing a lot of Bill Holman arrangements. I think Bill Holman's one of the great arrangers ever.
Yeah.
So it's not a surf record. And the quick story behind that is that we did with Kevin Gray, and I got to his studio, and he had just finished putting the tape on the machine. He starts play, hi Bob first. He starts play, and both of us were like, "Oh my god!" He goes, "What is this?" And I had my reference copy with me, my original. He
Yeah.
looks at the jacket and he goes, "How do I not know this record?" Now, this is a guy that's been doing nothing but the top jazz records for the past 5 years or longer, but you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I mean,
Yeah.
like 10 a week lately. And he's going, "How do I not know this record? It sounded amazing." We
Wow.
didn't do a whole lot to it. It's a stunning record and a stunning performance. That's one of my personal
Yeah.
favorites because I'm a big jazz
Nice.
fan.
Yeah.
And then the other one is Joshua Heifetz's "The Lark."
Yes.
Uh, we just released.
Yep.
Um, that is another record I've always been a Heifetz fan. I'm not a huge classical guy, but I've always been a huge Heifetz fan.
Yes.
And I found that and I put it on one day and I was like, "Oh my, this is different." Because it starts off with organ and
Yeah.
it's just Heifetz on violin. And it's like, wow, what a combination. And it's so
Yeah.
moving. And to give
Totally.
you an idea how moving it is, I had AB Fawn over for a listening session going through stuff I was suggesting for reissue. And I went through a bunch of stuff and she's getting into it. And all of a sudden I put that Heifetz the Lark on and she's like, when that was finished playing that first track, she was literally tears rolling down her eyes. And she goes,
Kidding. Wow.
I don't know whether to, you know, sit here and
Wow.
cry or go home and, you know what, with my husband. She was so moved by it.
Wow.
She was
Wow.
very affected. And she goes, "We have to do this." And I was like, "Well, yeah, but
Wow.
it's classical. Is anybody buying classical?" So there was that conversation. And she goes, "I don't care. We're doing this." I was like, "Great. It's one of my favorite records."
Yeah.
You want
Wow.
to get into the details on producing that?
Absolutely. Yeah. Please. I mean, might as well just jump right in. Why not?
So we tracked down actually work parts. We didn't actually use the the tape used for typical reissue pressing
Yep.
that they'd used historically. We actually went back to the original work parts and we worked with Andreas Mayer, amazing engineer and classical artist, and him and Chuck Granata, our who is an archivist at Sony, and
Mhm.
also works hand in hand with us on our literature.
Mhm.
Um, they got together and found that tape, and they made us a 1-to-1 copy, which we got it, and we were a little like, it is what it is. It doesn't sound like it's not moving me like I expected because it's a master
Yeah.
tape. I've only got these old copies. I had like probably 6 copies, a couple of
Wow.
first pressings, a couple of second pressings, up to the 70s red labels. I had a bunch of different copies, and they all sound different. But the tape was like I was expecting a lot, and it was what it was. So Bernie, God bless him, he's so good at what he does. He gets everything I say. He made me a first reference locker,
And
and
sorry, we're talking about Bernie Grunman.
yes,
Yep. Grunman mastering.
um,
Obviously, the great genius that is Bernie Grunman. I mean, started at Contemporary, if I'm not mistaken, right?
pretty much yes.
Yeah.
Contemporary records, and then A&M with for years. Cut
Amazing.
pretty much
The ears that he has,
the
unbelievable.
experience. Yeah. Um,
Unbelievable.
he actually originally was, well, I could get into that later, but he was a jazz fan. He feels the same way about reproduction that I do. If it doesn't
Mhm.
move you emotionally, if it, then you're missing the boat a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So with that in mind, he cut the side two, which is piano and violin. That sounded amazing. The second track on side one, piano and violin, sounded amazing. But that first track that moved us so much with the organ,
Oregon. Yep.
lacking. So
Well,
Bernie just kept working it. I probably went through, I don't know, 4 or 5 different lacquers, sending them back and forth to Prescott, Arizona from Hollywood, until the last one came overnight, and I put it on, and I got emotional. I got teary-eyed because, 1, we're finally getting this project done, and 2, it was genuinely affecting me, and that's
yep.
the litmus test for me, so
Yep. Wow. That's incredible. And that's, of course, we're talking When did the original come out? Well, like 60.
57, it was released. It was recorded earlier, 3 different
Wow.
sessions,
Okay.
3 different
Wow.
recordings.
Wow. It's not even
Yeah.
60s. Yeah. I mean, we're talking obviously so much time passing. Um, and like you said, it's a record that very few people know. I never heard of it until
No,
I heard it at your house, I don't know,
no.
10 years ago, maybe.
Yep.
Or whenever it was the first time you played it for
Sure.
me. And yeah, I mean, it's incredible that, for me as someone who really loves classical music, it's great to see that a company like Impex invests that time and effort into re-releasing something that, you guys are not even sure if it's going to sell or not, right?
No.
At that point, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not like, gets Gilberto.
It doesn't click off all the boxes.
Right. Yeah.
Not stereo. It's old. It's classical. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing. And yeah, I mean, hey, I haven't done my video on it yet, but if you're watching this session right now, right here, and if you're even remotely interested in classical music, get this record. I'll put a link below where you can get it at Elusive Disc. It's absolutely killer. And like Bob said, it will definitely get your emotions cooking.
Well,
Um,
that's one of the beauties of it. Um, Over the years, I would say 90% of the people I've played it for weren't classical fans. They're either jazz or rock fans. That's usually my group. And every time they're like so affected by it. They're like, "What is that? That's amazing." So
yeah,
there you go.
yeah, yeah. So interestingly, that we kind of broached the subject of the HiFi, the Lark. You and I obviously talk all the time, and I knew how difficult this, or not, I shouldn't say difficult, how complex this reissue was in particular, given that Bernie had to go back and forth a bunch of times. But there's another reissue that just came out recently that also posed a couple of interesting challenges that needed to be overcome, which of course is none other than the amazing Gets Gilberto on one step, of course, 45 RPM. What's the story on the Gets Gilberto, Bob?
Where to begin?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, pick any point.
Strictly from my perspective, I was like, wow, really? And you know why? I mean, I don't have to tell anybody else. There's a lot of reissues of it out there.
Yeah.
I was like, okay. But I mean, I don't have to dig into AB's thinking on this, but the gist of it was we're working with the family, we're getting extra material, and
Yeah.
we're going to do the one step, and we're going to do a knockout version that will be the last one anybody needs, hopefully. We get the at Bernie's, we get the tapes, and I show up at Bernie's with AB, and there was 4 tapes there, and 2 of them were the original stereo tapes. One was marked original master, and the second one was like a work tape, and then the mono tape, and then a 4th tape with the singles edits
Mm-hmm.
that they use for the 45 RPM singles for promotion, typically. So basically, we listened to the 2 stereo tapes first, and like, okay, we noticed the issues with the master, and the second work tape just didn't have the groove. It didn't have the transparency that we wanted to
Yeah.
hear,
Yeah.
and the mono was, it just didn't have either of the things we were looking for. So the big question then was, with the master tape, it's got a lot of flaws on it, and but it's certainly got a lot of great music and a great sound on it to work with. So the question I posed to AB, I said, look, by the way, we used multiple copies for reference. I have probably 6 early 60s copies mono. I've got the Analog Productions 45, which is excellent.
Mm-hmm.
I did we have the mobile fidelity? I'm not sure if we did, but anyway, we had multiple copies as reference. Digital, we had the 97 Digipack CD
Yeah.
on. So, I went home with the first just rough reference lacquer and listened to all my other copies in comparison. And I was like, that Analog Productions is pretty good. Yeah, I gotta say. So we have to somehow do it better. And by the way, we're using the exact same tape. I mean, no different.
Yeah.
George Marino used at Sterling back in the day.
Yeah.
So back with Bernie, after talking with AB about it, I said, we should go for the highest resolution version possible, forgetting, we can't correct the flaws, and they're there.
Yeah.
And they're not that much. I mean, let's not make a big deal out of something that's, it's a couple dropouts maybe and some bass distortion, really. But ultimately, it's not that big of a deal when you consider the amazing music. And so again, back and forth, just Bernie's amazing at just like getting the groove. This is like, Bob, this is bossa nova. We need that bass line, we can't mess with that, and we try to clean it up as much as we can because it is a little obscured. And then during Stan's sax solos, it's just so loud and clear, and we're like, okay, on every other copy it's really loud and clear. We're just doing touches here. We just brought it back a touch to have it blend with the vibe of the bossa nova, the rest of the band. And I think it really worked. That was Bernie's suggestion, and he was so right. He's like, "Oh yeah, now it blends. It's beautiful."
Yeah.
And like I said, we didn't mess with it as far as trying to obscure anything. We just said, full blast, give it full resolution, and
open it up.
Where it does. I think people are happy with it because they're, again, my emphasis is they're connecting with it emotionally, and that's, to me, I've done my job.
100%. And I know for a fact that, in listening sessions with you over the last, 20 years, I think you bring up this interesting point of this emotional connection, right?
Yeah.
Which, frankly, I mean, that's what music is all about, right? For the most part.
Yes.
And so I think, I guess, kind of getting into the question of, what is, because people ask me all the time, right? Hey, what do you think of this record? What do you think of this reissue? Should I get this? Should I get that? And I'm like, hey, this is, I wouldn't waste my, 50, 60, 70 bucks on it. I think if you get a clean original, you're going to be well served.
Yes.
But there are certain reissues that come up that really are significant improvements over an original, right? Which then sort of begs the question, I guess, what is the purpose of a reissue, right?
Accessibility.
What's that?
Accessibility.
Interesting. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, from the general point of view, from our point of view, of course, it's trying to do better, but
yeah. I mean, I guess, can you do better? Like, could you, okay, let me backtrack. Could you reissue Gets Gilberto to sound exactly the way it did on the first pressing with the first metal parts?
Literally impossible. Well, nothing's impossible, but well, first of all, take away the fact that supposedly the very, very first issues were mastered by Phil Ramone himself from the three-track master. And he's probably doing mixing and mastering simultaneously on the fly. I mean, who knows? But I have not accessed that copy. I haven't found one yet. And then after it became popular a year later, they had to make a two-track work master.
Production copy.
So, but if you're talking in general or just Gets Gilberto?
In general.
So, I love my good originals, or not necessarily originals, but early pressings.
Yep.
Early there, if you do the work and if you have access to as many records as I happen to have, you'll find gems. I mean, that just stand out. Every record sounds different. Every pressing sounds different. There's many reasons for that. There's, what time, well, different masterings, of course, different pressing plants, of course. They're all
Yep.
using different vinyl formulas. Things like time of day, what's the power doing? Is it humid out, or is it dry out? Is it hot? Is it cold? Everything matters. Everything. So that's
Wow.
why every single copy you do, especially in the older days when there was less intense control and a little more primitive
Yep.
compared to today's cutting lathes and presses. Um, Everything seemed to matter, and therefore, every pressing you listen to is going to have sonic differences. Are they going to be dramatic? Sometimes, yes. Like the difference between the average Led Zeppelin 2
Mhm.
with the original catalog number and the very first ones cut by Robert Ludwig, they're dramatically different. They're night and day different. I mean, it's not even similar.
Absolutely.
Uh, but that's an extreme example. Even with Gets Gilberto, you could buy 10 copies of the same stampers, and even there's differences there. They're going to be subtle. The higher resolution your system is, the more you'll hear them. But so to your question, it's not like we don't try to like I bring what I consider a hot sounding copy to
Yep.
the mastering sessions, my best sounding copy that I can find, and we play it and we try, and they got the tape uh,
Running. Yep.
running right next to it. They time it, they synchronize it. And there's a switch where you can go back and forth, hear the disc, hear the tape, hear the disc, and he's making EQ choices and level choices, trying to first get it close,
Mhm.
and then if we can get it better.
Mhm.
But even if I say, can we make it exactly like that? He goes, well, not really, because the vinyl formulations,
Everything's different. The
yeah,
equipment.
the cutting lathes are so much more precise today.
Mhm.
Everything about them is more precise. So you're
Mhm.
getting more transparency, more dynamics. Is that always a good thing? That's up to the individual. Yes or no. It's there's trade-offs and everything. Um, so
Absolutely.
again, it's not like, when critics say, "Oh, this mastering is terrible," what was he thinking? Well, it's not like they're trying to make a bad record. It's like it's there's so many factors that
Factors.
come into
Yeah.
play that you'll never get the golden age of stereo sound again. You'll get different. You'll get better in some ways and worse in some ways. Like I said, audio is all about trade-offs, and that's the one thing I could give to people that are especially newbies. It's all about trade-offs. You make an improvement in one area and something else suffers, and vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah.
And every system likes different records better than others.
Yeah.
Every system is, if you listen to mostly classical, big orchestral,
Yeah.
and all when you put on some intimate jazz, it may not work. Or
Yeah.
if you gear your system to play hard rock with good punch and just an incredible air moving life, it may not be sound great on a system that was geared for jazz or vice versa.
Yeah. Or
So in
for
my
solo
opinion, everyone
cello.
should have at
Yeah.
least 3 stereos. Did you hear that?
Dude, honestly, Bob, I'm so glad you're saying that. I have, for the longest time, been a proponent of people having more than one stereo for
If you can
that
do it.
simple reason. For
Yes.
that, I do not believe that a single stereo can reproduce music equally for every piece of music that's out there.
Of course not.
I really don't. And I've been telling people, they're, oh, should I get the, $50,000, speaker XYZ, or I'm like, dude, why don't you get two pairs for 25,000 each? Right? No, seriously, right? And then you can listen to different speakers, right? Because we all know that at the end of the day, the room and your speakers are
Yes.
going to make the biggest single difference in what you hear, period.
And yeah, all things being equal, yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I'm glad you touch on that, and I see it so often when I'm looking on YouTube. Obviously now, print is dead. online reading is dead. Where does everybody hang out? All the cool kids, they all want to be YouTube stars, right? and so, you know, you've got this over the last 2, 3, 4 years, 2 years really, I think, ever since COVID kind of came, you've got so many YouTubers out there, right? And I'm always like, okay, what's your experience, right? And look, I'm not saying I've got the most experience. I don't, by no doubt, right? But dude, I've been listening to music for like 40 years.
Yes.
Right? I've heard hundreds of turntables in my lifetime. I've heard great ones. I've heard really shitty ones. I've heard shitty ones that everyone says are great to me, right? And you know, I always chuckle when we're together and we've had a couple of tequilas. But you know, it's like I'm always like, okay, what is your reference? What are you basing your opinion on? Who was your mentor? Who taught you what you know? Which I think generally we're losing a little touch of that, right?
Well, yeah, it goes back to something you brought up before in the past about, you know, subjectivity.
Yeah.
Right. Listening is subjective. Well, you just explained actually the disclaimer on subjectivity. What's your experience?
Right.
What's your audio experience? I grew up with not high end, but certainly really good mid-fi. Older brother, my father, both were heavily into music. They had decent systems. So I had somewhat of a reference, and then of course, live music. But I don't know if you want to get into this, but live music and recorded playback is
totally separate thing.
Entirely different subjects, and I don't really want to get into that because what we're doing, what we're talking about, is purely music reproduction from a source,
pre-recorded medium,
100%. So what, live or not or whatever, I hear people, especially in the audiophile world, say that's their reference. Well, yeah, but we're not talking about live music. We're talking about reproduced music.
Yeah,
totally different subjects. It's never going to be the same, folks. Digital does get you closer in a sense, in a lot of ways, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about enjoyment of recorded music, right?
100%. 100%. You know, going back to, I just remembered going back to your comment earlier about, you know, doing the shootouts and having multiple copies.
Yes.
You know, I personally never had heard, I was of the opinion that, okay, yes, look, vinyl, man, come on. It's such an imperfect medium that you're bound by physics. And to your point, was it rainy that day? How hot was the stamper? Was it, you know, half a degree cooler than yesterday? That's all going to have an impact on the sound quality, right?
Well, but yes and no, but
when we did that, what I call our magical night, right? Which I don't know, it was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago.
Other than that now.
Emerson, Lake and Palmer.
Oh my. Oh my, yes.
I mean, that was epic, right? You pulled out what, 12, 14, 15 copies of ELP?
Yeah, but to be fair, I already had gone through them and was like, I was only going to play you the best 5 or 6, but still, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that was, to me, completely ear opening as to just how big of a difference a record can have that has the same source, has the same equipment that was used to make it, right? And yet here was like night and day difference of what they sounded. And, you know, I picked the second best copy. You still have the best sounding one, right?
Yep.
But I got the second best copy, and man, I mean, you know,
same stampers.
What's that?
Yours and mine are the same stampers, by the way.
Oh, they are? Okay, gotcha. Yeah.
That's a tough record to reproduce because it's so complex, and you know, congestion becomes a factor and what have you. And what we looked for on that, because I think you and I both agree that bass slam is fun. And on that, it's really fun. That kick drum on that, oh my. and to get the piano clean without sibilant issues.
Yeah.
Those are the good copies. And yeah, that hot stamper is
Yes.
is amazing. It
Yeah.
truly is. But
Yeah.
I have to say, give you a compliment, Danny. It was at your old place in Long Beach,
Yes.
the small
Yeah.
place with your
Yeah.
big speakers in this tiny room.
Yeah.
Big Alexanders or Sashas, or what were they?
Those were the orange speakers, Alexias, the original
Alexias.
Alexias. Yes.
And you had the Einstein
Yep.
amp and preamp going, and you put on the copy I sold you,
Yep.
and that whole house was shaking in a good way. It was amazing. It was so clean, and we played it pretty loud, I gotta say. But it did. It was amazing. It was you played that back way better than I ever could.
Yeah, that was magic. That was definitely magic. Yeah, I play that record often, without a doubt. Yep. So, talking about, I guess, all the variables and sound quality and all that, with regards to record collecting today, right? Yeah. What suggestions, what advice would you give to someone that's starting out and being like, hey, you know what? Here's, the fancy reissue for $50, $60, $70, $100. And, I go to my local swap meet, or I go to my local grocery store, and, I found a copy for $10, $5. Is that going to sound any good? What's what's that?
Maybe not.
What advice would you give to someone starting to get into records?
That's a tough one, because it depends on a lot of things. It depends on how deep you want to get. It depends on how much time you have in life. It depends on how much money you have in life. There's a lot of factors. If you're an average guy that's, a young guy that's just starting out, you're talking about strictly the record end of it, not the gear end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have time, get out and support your local brick and mortars. That's my biggest advice. Yep. Seriously. If you have the time and the money, get out and start off with reasonably priced, or used copies. Do your due diligence, look at them under a good light, make sure they're not marked up, and take them home and listen to them. If it doesn't sound good, hopefully you haven't spent too much. You go try again. If you have the time and the energy to do it, go out like I used to do in the early days. Hit swap meets and thrift stores and estate sales, and there's many ways to do it on the cheap, or not much anymore, but relatively. And new reissues are a good way to go, mostly. In the sense that, they're, in the scheme of things with inflation and everything, they're not that far off price wise what a used record used to be 50, 60 years ago. And, I guess you have so much available to you now to find out whether first you even want the music. You can stream endlessly.
True point. Yeah.
YouTube endlessly to find music you actually want to own. But if that's mostly what you're used to doing, streaming and YouTube and what have you, when you get your first record home on a decent playback, record player, you're just going to be like, oh, this is what it's about. It's a whole different experience. I mean, it really is. You'll relax into the music.
Yeah.
You'll just be so much more pleased with yourself because you found something you could actually hold on to. Yeah. And as long as it's in decent condition and it's mastered properly, hopefully you're going to put that on. And if you have a decent playback system, not a Crosley, thank you very much.
This show is sponsored by Crosley.
sorry, but yeah, I mean, you hopefully will get it. But yeah, I mean, that's a huge conversation in itself.
No, obviously, I mean, I think the key to keep in mind is, I like the fact that you brought up, stream it first, see if it's something you even like, right? if it's just one song on a record that's got 10 or 12 cuts on it, maybe that's not money you want to spend on, right?
Yeah.
And obviously you gotta listen to it and play grade it, right? I just came across I think I mentioned this to you, a Shirley Horn that I picked up a couple of weeks ago on eBay. Mint cover, mint record, no spindle marks. I was like, oh man, this is gonna sound great. Completely distorted, ruined forever, irreversibly. And even though the guy said no returns, I was like, dude, hey, hear me out. I'm playing this on a high-end setup. Trust me, the distortion is there. You can't unhear it. This is a shot record. Would you mind if I returned it? And the guy was like, oh, dude, no problem at all. Send it back. But I think it goes to show that
damage caused by, you should let people know, typically.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's when you're, because you sell on eBay, and I know that you personally inspect every record that you sell. You play grade it, you visually grade it, and then it gets like the Bob score, and then it goes on for sale, right? So I guess finding reputable sellers, right? I mean, not that I want to make this about plugging you or your store or anything on eBay, but I think that's a big deal, especially today, where I mean, gosh, prices are going up and up and up.
Yes.
Right.
Well, don't scare people away, Danny.
No, true story. True story. Yeah.
But so I should mention what probably caused that damage, because you're looking at a mint record. Why is it distorting? For those that may not know, it's probably more than likely played with a damaged stylus and or a really heavy tracking way beyond its recommendation. Tracking heavy and probably damaged stylus, which we're talking diamond against plastic. What's going to win? So as it's playing, it's chiseling away some of the music. Therefore, you get what they call groove distortion. It's a problem. I mean, we run into, but don't scare people away, because that's literally 1% of the records I buy.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, it doesn't happen often, but when it does happen on a record that is rare and you've been so jonesing after it, then it's like, God.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
But it is what it is. So we talked about IMPEX. We talked about records in general. HiFi. HiFi. So over the years, you obviously have picked up not only great records, but you've also gotten into good used equipment that you either refurbish, clean up, or whatever, and build little systems for starters, or whatever. When you look at the sort of hi-fi world altogether, right? And your system, vintage based, which I absolutely love.
I didn't start there though. I actually started in like brand new high end. I don't know if you knew that.
You did? Okay.
Yes. Probably again like 1990-ish.
Okay.
I went out and bought pretty much, the only music I bought, which I still own, is the Goldman Studio turntable, which is a piece of art in its concept, and sounds amazing. But no, I had brand new electronics. I tried many different things. Threshold back then, Levinson. Yeah, I mean, all kinds of different things. I tried many different turntables, the Lin LP12 brand, many different cartridges. Speakers was the hardest part, like you said earlier. Speakers was like, where's the beef? Where's the energy? That was like one of my key things. Was like, these audiophile speakers, they're distortion free, but they're just not moving me, and they're not moving air. Big drivers is a nice thing to have to move that air. I did start off with new gear. as I went along, I realized that, you don't need to go there because I'm not into chasing gear as far as latest, greatest, or whatever. But I
Yep.
am into uh, uh, sound that gives me what I want out of music.
Yep.
An emotional connection. It
Yep.
has to be somewhat accurate to a degree, of course. It has to be tons of energy.
Yep.
Energy is a key thing for me. I don't like smooth. I don't like,
Same
uh,
here.
yeah.
Yep.
And it needs to move air with the bass, and you need to feel it. I mean, I could go on and on, but so I designed my system, my listening and system like that. And by the way, I have 3 systems in a sense. I have a all solid state system in my office.
Yep.
Uh, with I generally use, just like every mastering engineer I've worked with, we all use Shure variations of the
Yep.
V15,
Yep.
either the V15 or variations, because they're highly accurate. Are they the most fun to listen to? Not always, but they're highly accurate, ruler flat,
Yep.
and we all have it, so we're all hearing basic similar things. So my
Yep.
office system is built purely towards accuracy as much as I can. Uh, and my main system it still has to be accurate, but it's fun. I listen to 90% jazz, and I'm telling you, I never get tired of listening to records. I mean, I never get fatigued. I have tons people come over and like, it's so clear, it's so much energy.
Yep.
Why am I not hearing that elsewhere? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yes.
Actually, I do know. So again, back to your question, uh, if you don't have the time and you have the money, yeah, you go out and buy a system and hope for the best. But it really is about doing the work. And
Yep.
what I mean by that is not only just picking the right components, but setup is everything.
Yep.
It literally is everything. I mean, I just moved into this house 2 years ago, and the room was problematical. Dropped the same exact equipment in I was listening to, which sounded amazing, and I had all these issues, mainly with bass suck out.
Yep.
So I spent, on and off, well, yeah, 5 solid months
Well,
just trying room treatments, trying, I mean, endless speaker movement, cables, yeah,
yep.
on and on and on. There's only so much you could do with a room,
Yep.
but so I ended up with having to do bass reinforcement with a nice Rel subwoofer that they were
Yep.
kind enough to give me a little bit of a discount on. So that was nice. But no,
Yep.
that solved a lot of the problem. But point of the matter is it's about tweaking. But you ask, how do you do that if you don't have the experience? Well, that's a tough one. You have to find a good audiophile friend that's been doing it for 40, 50 years to
You gotta
come
get a
over and help
mentor.
you. You
You
know?
gotta get a mentor. Yep.
Yeah, you really, yeah, you talk about mentoring all the time, don't you?
Yep. Yep. Oh, absolutely. I think it's critical. And I think it's you need to have someone that can steer you, right? I mean, look, first big mentor of mine even before I met you, Dan Meinwald, right?
Oh, we love Dan.
When I started writing for Positive Feedback, it just so happened Dan lived in Long Beach, right? 20 minutes away from me. And we developed a great friendship early on. And I mean, gosh, he taught me how to set up cartridges on turntables. He taught me about music, things that I never even knew, right? And then, through that, you start meeting other people. That's how I met you, right? Pincus, you mentioned Robert Pincus earlier. And I think it's important to, especially for people getting started, because I was a spring chicken. I mean, yes, I've been listening to HiFi ever since I was 15 years old, thanks to my brother, kind of like you, right? Older brother, HiFi, it was the thing to do. There was no internet. There was no video. What do? You listen to records, right? But even so, I mean, having someone that you can trust with the knowledge and perspective that they have to guide you, I think it's critical. And I mean, I always tell people, I'm like, find someone who knows what they're doing.
And is open to the sound you're looking for.
Absolutely.
The sound they're looking for. Unless you love their sound, then by all means, you
100%.
should go out and buy everything they have and
100%.
have them help you set it up. I mean, if you love their sound, that's the easiest and probably the best way to do it.
100%.
I mean, the stereo you love. You know.
For those listening in, Bob's phone number, if you want to call him, is 800-555-5555.
No.
Well, your phone's gonna ring off the hook now.
Oh my.
Too funny. Bob, this was absolutely great.
Yeah.
Thanks for taking the time to spend an hour with us here. I know you got a million things going on, and I'm sure AB probably texted you 50 times by now.
Test pressings. Endless test pressings.
Yes, that's right. I completely forgot. Let's leave with this.
Oh, the lacquers.
Because I think you have them by your side somewhere.
I do.
Jennifer Warren's
famous
blue raincoat. Because I just did a video on that, shooting it out with the crystal disc. Let me take a quick peek. Just in case you were doubting.
So
what I was saying, go ahead.
So these are the Jennifer Warren's One Step was a long project. Oh man, lacquers are very heavy, folks. So this is, how do I look at this? Here we go. This is 12 lacquers. Now, like this one, for instance, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
We really went all out on this. This is a test just for the cutting stylus. This is a test done with the diamond stylus, which wasn't in use at Bernie Grumman's. They, using the typical stylus ruby style stylus that most people use.
Yeah.
But we did a test with this stylus. We did a test with a new ruby stylus.
Wow.
We did a test. So yes, we've got a dozen reference lacquers. So some of those are, we tested without going through the board, directly from the tape machine to the cutting lathe. We ended up going through the board. Now, a quick tidbit on that. The original, it was recorded digitally originally, and then it was intentionally right off the bat mixed to analog tape.
Yeah,
that was highly intentional, not accidental or anything like that. They knew that they wanted to warm it up, and it was in the early days of digital, what have you.
Sure.
So bypassing the board, which is a custom made, it's Bernie's board. It's really well made. It doesn't have a ton of sound to it that you don't want, right? But going directly to the lathe, because it was a digital source, and especially the first track is a little bit on the edgy side, it sounded more digital. More of that came across, of course, because you're taking something out of the chain. So going through the board, which also allowed us to EQ, it just worked. It warmed it up a touch, if that makes sense. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to make it, for me, more palatable.
Yeah.
We did test back when they had their tube cutting lathe still running. They've discontinued that about 2 years ago.
Okay.
We ended up going with the solid state lathe, and we did all these tests to hear the subtle differences. And
wow.
Yeah. That's only the first part. Then we're testing vinyl, with the VR 900, regular vinyl.
Yeah.
It goes on and on. And then it's a one step. So we've got, 4 plates per, one plate for each side, but we have to do like 10 to 15 plates per side, because the plates are for one step are only going to last, it's not a definite number, but around 500 copies pressed before you retire it. So you can imagine it was having to and test pressing of a one step plate is only done once. You can't reconnect it to the press and do it again, because it causes more problems. So we only get one chance at a test pressing. So those plates are pass fail. If it's too noisy or noisy at all, really, it's a fail. We have to cut it again. We have to have Bernie cut it yet again. And again.
Wow.
So the process is insane. Oh, and real quick, I'll show you This is Bernie's handwriting, by the way. This is the Gets Gilberto one step.
Nice.
And oh, this was the test press for the extra track, which came from the tape that had the singles.
Okay.
Tape. So these are all the singles, and I went through, listened to all the singles, and said which one do we want to use for the extra track? And we ended up using the mono track of "Girl from Ipanema" that said no echo. That was the most interesting, most different.
Yeah.
And the other track, the other extra track, I actually demanded on because it was such a great sounding track. Corcovado is my favorite song on the album, and as we've talked about, Corcovado has that very slight bass distortion. And it's my favorite song, so I said, well, I went to a CD I had of that had extra tracks from Carnegie Hall. I think it's Jazz Samba is the one that's whatever it is. But the live at Carnegie Hall sessions, and I heard Corcovado on that. I'm like, oh my. So we actually tracked down the tape for that, and we spliced that in. Yeah, that sounds amazing. Oh my God.
Awesome. Yeah. Great reissue. I keep saying it, IMPEX really goes through lengths to get the sound quality that you guys get with the reissues that you do. And kudos. I mean, I always look at it, because I oftentimes wear my business hat, and I'm like, wait a second, you did all this extra work, you did all these extra test pressings, but you didn't jack up the price for that, right? I mean, the consumer at the end of the day pays the exact same amount for whether or not Jennifer Warnes went through 12 test pressings and lacquers, or whether it just did one.
Yeah.
Right? And by the way, all that stuff costs money.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And it's not like you guys are getting filthy rich off of reissuing records.
Nobody's getting rich off these.
Exactly. So, kudos for doing the work that you guys do. And now that you're part of the team, obviously I'm giddy to see all the goodies that are going to be coming throughout the year and next year. And once more, thanks for joining, Bob. Great pleasure to have you.
Pleasure to be here.
I can imagine that you're going to be busy with all these different stream sessions on YouTube going forward. So, this was your first one.
It is. Thank you.
Yeah. Good stuff, Bob.
All right, my brother.
Thank you.
Take care.